writers, I want to just touch on a little portion or part of Solomon's Masters of Desire, the essay that we have read for class. And I want to focus this video lesson to make it brief on some of the key things that Solomon says about populist and elitist advertising. So just to review back here, the American dream has these two faces, Solomon theorizes. One, communally egalitarian, so community, everyday people, being one of the many, one of the crowd, looking out for the best interests of all of us. And the other, competitively elitist, so being better than other people, rising above others, and that sort of fierce competition to get ahead, and that sort of means to get ahead of other people. So here too, he says we have in a lot of advertising the virtues of mom, apple pie, the girl or boy next door, sort of hometown, everyday working class vibes in advertising and those types of appeals. But then we also tend to see these appeals to be distinct, to rise above, to be better than, or that the product is for those who are better than, to rise above the crowd and bask alone in the glory. So Solomon tells us that, we looked at, or we look at these two examples as well. Solomon talks about both Jack Daniels and Johnnie Walker and how they are about the same price point, but they advertise in very different ways. One, Jack Daniels tends to advertise in a populist way, Johnnie Walker in an elitist way. And you can notice details in these ads, color, composition, content, and copy that relate to populism, that relate to elitism, and help those class appeals come through in all the choices of the different elements of the ad. So, looking at some of these populist and elitist examples that Solomon gives in Masters of Desire. He gives examples of Cadillac ads. Back in the day, Cadillac ads, right? Cadillac used to be a big status symbol in America. If you had a Cadillac, you'd arrived. It was sort of the car to have. Solomon says about status symbols, they're signs. So they're symbols that we send, right? They're signs that identify their possessor's place in a social hierarchy. Status symbols are markers of rank and prestige. And Solomon tells us that, in other types of society, so if you're thinking about, old-timey England, right? You could tell just by, looking at someone if they were of the upper class. But we don't have those same markers, right? The only way we know if someone is of the upper class in America is whether they have upper class stuff, whether they have the car that tells us they're rich, whether they have the house that tells us the clothing, the watch, the jewelry that tells us they're rich, right? That's the main way we know if someone is rich. And so if we are wealthy, if we have arrived, if we made it, if we are the elite, we want those things to send that message to other people. And that's his theory about status symbols. And so the advertising then, advertising has to convince us that the product is a status symbol. So we can take a look at this Cadillac ad and think about, how do we know that Cadillac is trying to market itself as this status symbol, a symbol of the upper class status of the people who own it? So we can think about, of course, color. You will notice there's a lot of golden tones and then the blue. And these are, it's lending to this classy vibe. We even see here the gold here. The person's shoes, the woman's shoes are even gold. So we have a lot of these golden tones with the blue and the black creating this classy vibe. We can look at content, which is the visual details of the ad. Of course, we have the woman, so we would want to think about her clothing. There's a lot of fabric, and it seems to be sort of a fancy or more expensive fabric. Fabric is expensive, and there's a reason that princesses in fairy tales have these big poofy dresses. Fabric used to be very hard to get. If you think about silk traveling from China to England or wherever, with the silk going literally, how are you going to get it there? It's very expensive to trade these fabrics. And so we associate a lot of fabric and a lot of nice fabric with class, upper class. These gloves as well are a symbol for us of class because they relate to that princess thing, or, like royalty. Literally a symbol that the world is dirty and this pure person mustn't touch it, right? We can see her jewelry. There's a lot of diamonds or pearls going on, very big jewelry. She's got the red lipstick. She's got the close cut hair, which I think at the time the ad came out, that was sort of a status symbol as well. So the visual details of the ad, we could talk about the type of car and, this part of the car looking all very upper class or high class, rich and wealthiness in the ad. So we've talked about color, we've talked about content. This particular cropping of the image doesn't have a slogan, so we wouldn't have any copy to examine, but I want you to take a look at composition. So you want to think about, for composition, where the eye is drawn. It's really interesting that they took the picture from this angle, right? It's not just the side angle of the car or the front angle of the car. Your eyes are sort of drawn here, and then look at the lines of the picture. They lead toward the woman. So the composition of this is suggesting that the car and the woman are related. Like, along with the car, you get the woman. So, having the classy woman, having achieved the classy woman, having achieved the classy car, those are both symbols, status symbols of having arrived. I think it's interesting as well that the woman is coming from the passenger side of the vehicle. So this does not seem to be an ad for women, even though it features a woman. It seems to be an ad suggesting to a man that this is the type of guy that drives this car, the type of guy that would have this woman, the type of guy that would have this vehicle. So status symbols. Take a look at these other Cadillac ads from a similar era. He says, ads of this kind work by creating symbolic associations between their product and what is most coveted by consumers. So there's a symbolic association between the Cadillac and all the trappings of that rich, wealthy, upper class life. Notice how they use the emblem here. It's pointing downwards, drawing our eye. We've got the fur coat and the woman. She is very large in the image, so there's a composition choice there, sort of almost like looming over it. And the woman is larger than the car, again suggesting that it's more about the lifestyle than it is about the vehicle. It seems to be selling us the lifestyle, and that woman comes along with the lifestyle, right? It's kind of difficult to read what's down here, but it talks about being stunning, gorgeous, having a gorgeous body, talking about the car, but creating that association with the woman. Here too, we have Cadillac, and instead of a woman, we just have this jewelry. So again, creating that association between the car and the lifestyle. It's trying to sell us the status, lifestyle. We see all these sparkly things. We see the golden fabric again, magnificent beyond all expectations. A lot of the word includes things like dramatic, luxurious, anticipation, without precedent. Come with your hopes set high. You'll still be pleasantly surprised with the latest and greatest of Cadillacs. So a lot of what we call purr words, or words that sound nice and smooth to create, and all of those are sort of elitist words like better than, types of words and phrasing. So all of these help create the idea that a Cadillac is a status symbol. So advertising creates status symbols, and then we want those things to send the message to the world that we are elite, that we have arrived, that we have money, that we have wealth. On the other hand, the populist commercials, right? So if the American dream encourages the desire to arrive, to vault above the mass, it also fosters a desire to be popular and to belong. And so a lot of brands, especially American vehicle brands, Solomon tells us, use this populist type of everyday advertising. Interestingly, Solomon tells us that car brands turned to populist advertising because they wanted to create a sense of patriotism because foreign cars were becoming more popular. So it's all a money-making, advertising, manipulative technique, Solomon tells us. So here we see this Chevy commercial. This is it's sort of a vintage ad, right? But he says populist commercials transform products into signs of belonging, and so the vehicle becomes a symbol for just being that everyday person, being part of the crowd, just being an everyday parent. It focuses on a low price point, an affordable price. It says a great way to teach your kids the value of the dollar, and then the heartbeat of America, today's Chevrolet. So using that patriotic appeal, that everyday populist appeal. And Solomon tells us specifically to try to, emotionally persuade us to buy American, because they were sort of beginning to lose money to foreign cars. So they really upped the ante on the populist appeals. Here we can see some alcohol brands that tend to use populist appeals. We know Budweiser. In fact, Budweiser recently has been like, we are not a fancy craft beer, and hitting that really hard in their advertising, trying to say this is the everyday beer, because they're losing money to craft beer companies. And so they want to create like this us versus them. Well, fancy people drink craft beers and we're not fancy. This is just Budweiser for the guys. So here we go. Budweiser, the neighbors out in the kitchen swapping ideas with good friends. This is fun. This calls for Budweiser. Where there's life, there's Bud. So this is just the everyday. This is not for fancy moments. This is just for hanging out type of moments. Again, to make money. Bacardi here. Bacardi often chooses to go sort of like hang in with the crowd instead of super fancy, depending on the price point of the alcohol. So if the alcohol price point is more expensive, they want to make you feel like you're getting your money's worth, so they'll make it seem fancier, which is really interesting and quite manipulative. This is just Bacardi Superior, so they're hanging out. I mean, who does this? They're hanging out on like in the middle of a street, having a picnic, having some cocktails. He's got a boombox over here. They're wearing plaid. They're wearing cargo shorts. They're wearing tank tops and sunglasses, and they've got a little hair scarf here. So super casual, right? Bacardi is for the super casual crowd. If you look though at advertisements like for I don't know, Bacardi Black, or maybe I don't know if that's a thing, but Bacardi that costs more, it's in a fancier setting, meaning it's okay to pay more for this because it's a little fancier. So that populist advertising, Solomon tells us, emphasizes the down-home, egalitarian folksiness of its product. So you can take a look at these Jack Daniels ads. Over here we have sort of a saloon vibe, the color scheme, the font, the ethos of 131 years, 7 generations, 1 recipe, this enough said, this sort of very casual language. There are faster ways of making whiskey. We just don't care to use them. A little bit manipulative, I guarantee. Jack Daniel's factory is not 2 guys in flannel hauling barrels around with their bare hands, right? They have a modern, up-to-date factory just like every other alcohol brand, but they're trying to build that ethos of the brand. Like, we do things the down-home, working-class way here at Jack Daniel's. You might want to check out some older Chevy truck ads. I'm not going to play this one because it'll probably flag me for copyright if I play the song, but if you Google Chevy trucks like a rock commercials, you can definitely see these down-home appeals. We've got, people just hauling their trucks, taking a break at work, drinking water, and their clothes are muddy. So we can definitely see a lot of these American-made vehicles using these populist appeals. So I wanted specifically to talk here about the populist and elitist advertising types of examples that Solomon gives in Masters of Desire. And as you're looking at your own ad that you've chosen for your paper, think about the types of populist or elitist appeals you see. And sometimes, really interestingly, we see both. So take a look at what you see in your own ad and start to think about your ad analysis questions and how you might build a thesis and a paper.